In 1997, a machine defeated the world chess champion. 14 years later, artificial intelligence beat humans on live television trivia. And in 2022, ChatGPT shocked the world with its ability to generate natural, instant responses. These breakthroughs appeared to happen suddenly, but they were built on 70 years of failures, funding freezes, and persistence. This is the complete history of AI. The field officially began in 1956 at a conference at Dartmouth College. Researchers looked at the primitive, room-sized computers of the era and formed an ambitious theory. They believed intelligence could be scientifically recreated. Early pioneers focused on logic, mathematics, and symbolic reasoning. They believed human thought was simply a complex series of steps and that it could be reduced to a logical recipe. The core thesis was straightforward. If human beings use logical rules to make decisions, we can program machines to do the exact same thing. This top-down approach failed to produce a thinking mind. It did, however, establish the rule-based foundation for all modern software and basic computer programming. A different approach emerged in 1957. A researcher named Frank Rosenblatt introduced the Perceptron. It was the very first iteration of a neural network. Instead of programming strict mathematical rules, Rosenblatt looked to biology. The perceptron was loosely inspired by how physical neurons connect in the human brain to learn simple patterns. The technology successfully learned basic shapes, and the resulting optimism was massive. Prominent scientists publicly declared that a machine with human-level intelligence would be built within a few decades. The reality did not match the hype. By the 1970s, computers lacked the memory, the data, and the processing power required to make these neural networks actually function. Governments realized the timeline was wrong. They reduced funding, labs closed, and the industry entered a period known as the first AI winter. The industry briefly thawed in the 1980s. Researchers abandoned the biological approach and returned to logic, creating what they called expert systems. This system is a clear example of that era. To build it, programmers had to interview top doctors and manually code thousands of specific if-then rules into the computer. These systems worked reasonably well in narrow scenarios, but updating and maintaining tens of thousands of rigid, interconnected rules became expensive and difficult. The code was simply too complex to manage. Because these programs still could not learn on their own, the hype collapsed again, triggering a second AI winter. In the 1990s and 2000s, the hardware caught up to the theories. Internet data exploded, and graphical processing units, GPUs, gave computers immense new power. This triggered a shift in how researchers approached AI. They stopped trying to program logic. Instead, they fed machines massive amounts of raw data to find patterns. This is machine learning. Like a child, you don't give a toddler rules defining a cat. You show 100 pictures until they instinctively recognize the pattern. By feeding data to algorithms, machines learned to adapt. This shift built the recommendation systems that now dictate movie choices and curate social media feeds. Throughout all of this, a few researchers refused to let the 1950s biological dream die. Scientists like Geoffrey Hinton kept working on neural networks through decades of skepticism and ridicule. They were building what became known as deep learning. It was essentially the original perceptron, but scaled up into massive multi-layered digital brains that were finally receiving the data and processing power they needed. In 2012, a neural network called AlexNet entered a major image recognition competition and dominated the results, beating traditional software by a massive margin. The entire computer science community took notice. AlexNet provided undeniable evidence that deep learning was the future of artificial intelligence. While AI mastered games and images, human language remained a persistent challenge. In 2017, a team at Google Research published a paper titled "Attention is All You Need," which served as the catalyst for the modern era. Older AI struggled with language because it forgot the beginning of a sentence by the time it reached the end. Transformers solved this by allowing the system to pay attention to every word in a whole paragraph at once. This mechanism preserved context across long passages, finally allowing machines to process and generate human language with startling accuracy. This breakthrough led directly to the sudden emergence of massive generative AI platforms like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. The history of AI is a jagged line built on extreme optimism, failed experiments, and decades of quiet persistence. The technical leaps we see today happened because small groups of researchers refused to abandon the dream during the long winters of the industry. This entire infrastructure of artificial intelligence exists because of the researchers who spent decades coding in the dark. In the next episode, the people who built modern AI.